What's up, peeps? It's me. I'm back. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody is staying safe, and I hope everybody is being smart. I hope everybody is going within, getting to know yourselves, loving yourselves, taking care of yourselves, loving each other, and taking care of each other. Now, today, I want to get right into this. Today, I want to get into talking about shadow work. Talking about shadow work. What shadow work is. How shadow work is important, some of the steps that you can take to begin your shadow work, what like I said, what shadow work means, what it means to have a shadow self. I want to get into all of that, right? Because shadow work, especially in the spiritual community, the spiritual community is real big, and the metaphysical community is real big on shadow work. And the reason why is because as a person, as a multidimensional spiritual being in this human body, you will not be able to reach the vibrations and the higher vibrational points in the spectrum. You won't be able to reach some of that. You won't be able to create the things that you're trying to create for yourself, the life that you're trying to create for yourself. You will not be able to manifest some of the things that you're trying to manifest unless you do some shadow work. Unless you go within and deal with your shadow self. Okay? It's very, very important, because that your shadow self is where most of your problems are. That's where most of your issues are, within your shadow self. And until you go there and deal with what's going on there, you won't be able to make some of the changes that you need to make. You won't be able to make some of the mental changes in mindset and in belief that you need to make. You just will not be able to go forward as far as your energetic self, and as far as your spiritual self, and as far as your subconscious self, to reach that higher level, to reach that higher, those higher versions of you. You got to do some shadow work. We all have to do it. So it's not like this conversation is specific to specific people, or people that have been through specific things or have experienced specific things or whatever. No, this is something that we all have to do when we're getting to know ourselves, when we want to learn who we really are, when we want to go inside and we want to find all the answers that we need, because all the answers that we need to all the questions in life are within us. But before you can get to that true stuff, before you can get to that universal stuff, before you can get to that stuff that's connected to Source, and Source is the creator of all things, until you can get to that place and reconnect with that Source and get in alignment with Source, you're going to have to do some shadow work. You're going to have to clear up some of that shadow stuff. Okay? So, that's what I want to get into today. And I want to start right here. I want to start with first talking about and us understanding how shadows are created in the first place. How do you get a shadow? We all see shadows. We see shadows every day. You understand what I'm saying? We see shadows of ourselves when we're outside walking and the sun kind of hits us in a certain type of way, and then we see our shadow moving alongside of us or right behind us or whatever. We see shadows of buildings. We see shadows of cars. We see shadows every day. In this 3D world, we see shadows every day. Even in the sky, we see shadows sometimes. We see shadows when the sun reflects on something, and boom, now you see a shadow or whatever. So we need to understand first how shadows are formed. Because see, when you use these words over and over and over again, shadow work and go within and do the inner work and getting to know your true self and know thyself, you use those words over and over and over again, they begin to start losing their meaning if you don't understand what they really mean. And a lot of people make them sound like they all mystical and they all magical and all of this, and it's like it's just some this heavy trip that you need to be on or whatever. No, I'm here to break it down and simplify it, so it doesn't sound overwhelming. It doesn't sound, you know, all mystical and all far out. You understand? And it doesn't sound like it's something that's so hard to do or whatever. I'm here to break it down and simplify it. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is talk about how a shadow anywhere, whether it's your shadow that's being created or whether it's a shadow, you know, children will shine a light and they'll put their hands and stuff and their fingers up against the wall and they'll create all kind of shadows of like bunny rabbits and all of this kind of stuff. Well, what we need to do first is understand how a shadow is formed, how a shadow is created in the first place, right? And y'all don't have to take my word for it. I'm just doing this. I'm simplifying this, and I'm doing this to make it as easy as possible to digest. But you can also go and you can also do your own research and find out some of this information for yourself, okay? But I'm doing it as simply as possible. How does light create shadows? Because you have to understand, in order for you to have a shadow, you have to have light. That light meets some kind of object, and it's when that light meets that object that the shadow is created, okay? But you have to have light in order to create a shadow. Without light, you get no shadow. So it's almost like a mixture. It's almost like a moment when light and darkness, or light and something that the light cannot penetrate, meet. And that's when that shadow is created, okay? And that's exactly what it says. How does light create shadows? Light travels in a straight line from its source, right? And the source of light for us here on earth is the sun, right? Okay, but say for instance your source of light is a candle. Say for instance your source of light is a flashlight. Say for instance your source of light is a lamp, right? So whatever that source of light is telling you that light travels in a straight line from its source, right? When light reaches a solid object, that means there's no transparency in this object. This object is solid. It's opaque. Because that object is solid, the light is prevented from moving through the object. If it's transparent, the less opaque it is, the easier it is for light to get through it and all of that. But the more solid that object is, when it gets to a point where light can't penetrate, where light can't move through that object, and the light is prevented from moving through that object, it leaves an area of darkness, because now instead of the light going straight through, the light is kind of spread out. It's like it hits this opaque solid object, and instead of penetrating and going through, it kind of spreads out. The light spreads out. And when the light hits the edges of this object, then that's when darkness occurs. And it's darkness on the other side because the light can't go through. So it creates this darkness on the other side of this object, and that is the shadow. It's the darkness that's created when this light hits this solid object and it can't go through this object. So all it can do is kind of spread around and maybe try to go around the object or go under or go above because it can't go through. And all that spreading of light, you understand what I'm saying? And all of that, the spreading out of the light and all of that is what creates this darkness behind this object. And that darkness is called the shadow. That darkness that is created behind this shadow because light, behind this object, this solid object, because the light can't penetrate it. The light can't penetrate it. It can't go through. It can't flow through that object. So it starts spreading out and going all around that object. And that creates a darkness behind the object. And that darkness is the shadow. When the sun hits you, because you are a solid object, you are solid. And the light from the sun, the rays of the sun, that light can't flow. It can't go through you. It can't penetrate you. It can go all around you. It can spread around you. It can go around you. It can go above you or whatever, but it can't flow through you. And because the light can't flow through you, when it starts spreading around you, it throws off kind of like this reflection. And that reflection becomes a darkness behind you. And that darkness is your shadow. So that's how a shadow is created. You have to have light, and you have to have light coming in contact with a direct object that the light can't go through. It can't penetrate that direct object. But the light can spread all around that object, and the reflection that you get, instead of getting light, you get a dark reflection, and that darkness is the shadow. Okay? So that's how a shadow is created. That's where shadows come from. That's how a shadow is formed. So understand, in order to have a shadow, you have to have light. You have to have light. Okay? Now, it says here that, and there's a question that's asked here, do shadows exist at night? And it says, to see a shadow, there must be a source of light and an object that blocks that light. Sources of light may be natural, sunlight or moonlight or artificial light. Like I said, you got a candle, you got a flashlight, any of those things are sources of light, whether it's natural or whether it's artificial. When an object blocks the beam of light shining on it, a shadow appears. So even at night, if the moon is casting a light on a solid object, if that beam of moonlight is strong enough and powerful enough, it will create a shadow, and it may create a shadow that you can see. But you need that source of light, and you need that solid object blocking that light in order to create a shadow, in order for you to see that the creation of this shadow. Okay? Now, that's just getting into the general fundamentals of how a shadow is created, and understanding that you have to have a source of light. Now, hold on a minute. All right. I'm not talking about that. I'm moving on to the next point. Okay? So, like I said, that's just getting into understanding how shadows are formed and how a shadow is created, right? Okay, now we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about each individual and the shadow self that we have. The shadow that we have within us. That darkness that has not been penetrated by light because some solid thing is blocking the light from penetrating, from flowing through, and it has created a shadow. It has created a darkness that is your shadow self, right? Okay, so let's go over here. And this is what it's saying about shadow self, right? The term the shadow was made popular by psychoanalyst Carl Jung. He saw it as the uncivilized, even primitive side of our nature. We all have a shadow self. That's what I just said. We all have a shadow self. So when it's time to do shadow work, that's something that everybody has to do. Because we all have a shadow self. We all have a self. We all have a part of us that's darker. Because certain things have happened in our lives. We've experienced certain traumas. We've experienced certain past events. We've experienced things in our lives. And those things are acting as a block. As a solid block to keep the light from flowing like it's supposed to within us. And that has created this shadow self. But we all have a shadow self. Let me read that again. The term the shadow was made popular by psychoanalyst Carl Jung. He saw it as the uncivilized, even primitive side of our nature. We all have a shadow self. It is generally made up of the parts of ourselves we deem unacceptable. Key, we deem unacceptable. It is not the parts of ourselves that other people have deemed unacceptable, but it is the parts of ourselves that we ourselves have deemed unacceptable. For many people, this means things like sadness, rage, laziness, and cruelty. Depression, anxiety, bitterness, resentment, shame, guilt. These are the things in ourselves that we have deemed unacceptable. And these things usually stem from some kind of past trauma, some kind of past event, something that happened in your life that is now serving as a block to keep the light from flowing through you, in you, around you as it should, and it has created this shadow. And it's in this shadow where you hide these things that you have deemed unacceptable about yourself. These things that you have deemed unlikable or unlovable about yourself. These things that you want to not only hide from everybody else, but you're trying to hide these things from yourself more importantly. And it's in this shadow, in this dark place where the light can't get to right now. That's the place where you hide these things. That's the place where you keep these things to keep them away from yourself. You don't want to think about them. You don't want to acknowledge them. You don't want to go in and deal with them. And you don't want other people to know about them either. And the reason why you don't want other people to know about them is because you have already deemed them unacceptable. You have already deemed them unlikable. You have already deemed them to be the negative, nasty, ugly things about yourself. Okay? I'm going to read that again. The term, the shadow, was made popular by psychoanalyst Carl Jung. He saw it as the uncivilized, even primitive side of our nature. We all have a shadow self. It is generally made up of the parts of ourselves we deem unacceptable. For many people, this means things like our sadness, our rage, our laziness, and our cruelty. That was just to name a few, right? And what he's talking about is this is the place that houses all those low vibrational emotions. The sadness, the guilt, the atrophy, the fear, the anger, the jealousy, the envy. These things that you know about yourself, you know these things exist, but you're trying to hide them from yourself and everybody else, so you put them in this dark place, in this shadow. Okay? Now, let's go on down here because it asks the question, is the shadow self the true self? Your shadow self is the sides of yourself that you keep hidden from most people. In essence, it is often your truth of who you are. So it's who you think you really are. It may not be who you really are, but you think that's the real you. And because you don't want people to know the real you, and because you don't even want to get to know the real you, you don't even want to deal with the real you, you keep this stuff hidden from yourself and from everybody else. The reason this is being hidden is because it is painful to look at aspects in ourselves that we do not like or are ashamed of. This is a very big misconception. So because you think that that's the real you, you walk around being fake and being phony and not knowing who you really are, because to actually go and deal with these things that you have hidden in this shadow, in your shadow self, because you have deemed them to be unworthy, you have deemed them to be unacceptable, you have deemed them to be things that have to be hidden. You understand what I'm saying? Things that you don't even want to acknowledge to yourself, and you definitely don't want to acknowledge to other people. You think that's the real you. So you think you're keeping the real you hidden from everybody. So the person that people see, the person that people interact with, is not the real you. Because you don't even know who the real you are, because to go and look at these things that you're hiding in this shadow, to go and deal with these things, is too painful. So you keep them hidden. But in order to find the real you, in order to get to know the real you, in order for you to meet your true self, you're going to have to go to that shadow place. You're going to have to go to that hidden place. You're going to have to go into that darkness, and you're going to have to deal with those things that you have deemed unworthy. Those things that you are ashamed of. Those things that you feel guilty of. Those things that cause you sadness and cause you pain. You're going to have to go in that place, and you're going to have to deal with those things if you ever want to find out who the real you is. Because the you that you are allowing everybody to see, the you that you interact with every day, and the you that's in this shadow place, together they form the real you. Together they form the real you. So it's not like that what's over there hidden in the shadow is the real you. It's not like this what you're presenting to everybody and this that you allow yourself and everybody to see is the real you. No. Both of them together are the real you. But you won't get there until you go in there and deal with that part of yourself that you don't want to see. That part of yourself that you don't want to acknowledge. That part of yourself that you don't want to deal with. So you keep it hidden in the shadow. Okay? Now, it asks a very, very interesting question here. It says, what is the difference between ego and shadow self? And you know, in the metaphysical spiritual world, they deal a lot with ego, right? And how the ego has to die in order for the true you to be born and come forth, right? And killing the ego is something that you have to do every day. That's something that you have to work on every day. Now, this is what it says. The simplest way to understand them is, ego is your identity, while the persona is the mask you wear to survive and thrive. Your social personality, that's the ego. And the ego is very much a part of your consciousness. So your ego is the part of you that keeps you moving and functioning and all of that, so that you can survive and so that you can thrive, and so that, you know, you can exist and you can do what you have to do and all of that. The ego is very protective. The ego is it does not want to give up its spot. It's very possessive, because the ego wants to run things, right? Your shadow is the aspect of you, is the aspect you hide so that you can integrate and find acceptance. Self is your true inner nature, who you are and who you always will be. So you got to decide which one of these is going to be in control. Which one of these is going to run the show? Your ego, who's trying to put up this persona and this mask and everything for everybody so that you can survive. The ego's only function is to make sure that you survive. It's to make sure that we be all right. That's the reason why when you're about to take a chance or you're about to take a risk or whatever, your ego steps up and says, wait. Because the ego is all about self-preservation. The ego does not believe in taking risk. The ego is all about, okay, we're gonna stay safe right here in our comfort zone, in what we know, what we're familiar with. That's what the ego is all about, right? The shadow is all about hiding those things from yourself and from everybody else that would keep you from being accepted, that would keep you from integrating into society and being accepted and being welcomed and being loved by other people. So it hides those things about you that would keep you from being able to do that, right? But your true self is just who you are. It's who you are. It's who you were always meant to be. It's your true nature. And you can't get to that true self. You can't get to just who you are and who you were always meant to be. You can't get to that until you deal with your ego and you deal with that shadow. And let the ego and the shadow know, hold up, wait a minute. You understand what I'm saying? We are no longer just going to stay in this familiar comfort zone, even though it's toxic, even though it's not really working for us, even though this is not really where I want to be or where we really want to be. We're just staying here and we're just dealing with this because it's familiar, because it's safe. So you got to let the ego know, no. We're going to step out of some of these comfort zones, because even though they're familiar and even though they're safe, they're toxic. They're toxic. We're not benefiting. We're not growing. We're not expanding. And why are we not growing? Why are we not expanding? Because we're not taking any chances. We're not stepping outside of anything. We're not challenging ourselves. So that's the reason why we're not growing and why we're not expanding. Then you're going to have to look at that shadow, and you're going to have to look at some of those things that you have hidden in that shadow, and you're going to have to say, okay, well, maybe, just maybe, this ain't as bad as I thought it was. And even if it is, who cares? It happened. It's part of my past. It's some trauma that I had to deal with. It's something that happened. And I'm going to have to deal with it. And I'm going to have to stop being concerned about what other people might think or about what other people might say, because I got some drama in my past. I got some trauma in my past. I got some mess in my past. There are some events, there are some things that happened to me in the past that were not pretty, they were not nice, but I got to deal with them. And it makes no difference what you think about those things. I have to acknowledge those things, embrace those things, and accept that those things don't define who I am. Those things don't define the person that I am and that I was always meant to be. They're just events that happen. They're just things that happened. And I can't walk around hiding from myself all my life and expect to live a good life. Expect to live a full, complete, satisfied, fulfilling life, and I'm walking around hiding me from me. And it's only when you deal with your ego and deal with that shadow and make sure that they understand that you as your true self are the one that's in control. You got to take your power. Before you can take your power back from other people, you have to take your power back from yourself. You have to take your power back from your ego and that shadow self that's running around trying to hide. And a lot of times once you get in there and you actually start dealing with these things and you actually start looking at these situations and looking at the trauma and realizing that things that happened to you when you were a child and you had no control over things. You had no control over what was happening to you. You had no control over where you was eating. And you didn't have any control over the basic things in life. Where you were going to eat, what you were going to eat, where you were going to live, how you was going to wear your... You had no control over the basic things in your life. So as a child, if you didn't have any control over your own life, how were you going to control what other people did to you? Whether it be rape, sexual assault, whether it be abuse, or whatever it was that you dealt with, or that you were exposed to as a child, and folks have walked around and made you feel like it was your fault. You're supposed to walk around with the guilt and the shame of this all your life. No. You were a child. You didn't have control over yourself. Less more control over what other folks was doing. But you won't know that. You won't know how to deal with that until you go into that shadow and you acknowledge that shadow and you acknowledge those things in that shadow that you've been trying to hide from yourself. And the reason why you've been trying to hide them is because you already think they're ugly, nasty, things that you need to be ashamed of, right? So because you feel like that, you think everybody else is going to feel like that. When at the end of the day, it don't matter how nobody else feels. Because it's not about you being loved and accepted by other people, by society, by outside forces, by external forces. What matters is that you love and accept yourself. That you forgive yourself. That you accept the fact that there were some things that happened to you in your life that you had absolutely no control over. And then understand that there were some things that happened to you in your life that you did have control over. But you chose to go a different way. Okay, I made some mistakes. But those are my mistakes. I own them. I ain't got to explain them to nobody. It makes no difference whether anybody accepts my mistakes or not. They were mine. As long as I accept them, as long as I forgive myself for them, and as long as I look at those mistakes and I see the lesson that I needed to learn from them so that I won't keep making that same mistake over and over and over again. But you got to go in and you got to be willing to look at that shadow. You got to be willing to deal with those things that about yourself that you have hidden in that shadow. Okay, now, I'm going to come back to that, but I want to go over here first. And it asks the question, what is shadow work? It asks the question, what is shadow work? Okay, we have identified and we have determined how a shadow is created. So you know now how that shadow self was created. That shadow self was created because something, like I said, it could have been a past event, some kind of past trauma, some kind of horrible event that happened in your past or whatever. And that event has become so powerful and has become so solidified in your consciousness, in your mind, that it has now become this very real object that's blocking the light from flowing all through you. The light of source, the light of love, You understand what I'm saying? The light of the light that is within you. That trauma, that past event, or whatever, it has become so real that it has become so solidified that it's stopping the light from flowing. And because the light can't flow through that object, the light cannot penetrate that object, that blockage that's there, it has now created a shadow. Your shadow self, a shadow of who you really are. It's not who you really are, it's a shadow of who you really are. And it's in that shadow that you are storing all of this trauma, that you are storing all of this bad stuff, all of these bad memories, all of these things that you feel guilty about, these things that you feel ashamed of, these things that you have deemed unlikable, unlovable, unacceptable about yourself. So that's how your shadow self was created, and we all have one. We all have one, and the shadow self does the same thing. It has the same function in all of us. So it's not like your shadow self have a different function from my shadow self. No, the shadow self has the same function in all of us. And that's that place that the light can't penetrate, where we choose to hide things about ourselves. The things that we don't like about ourselves. So we have established how a shadow in general is created. We have established how your shadow self is created, and that everybody has one, and the purpose of that shadow self. We have identified all of that. But now we have to get into, how do you get rid of that shadow? Or at least you can't get rid of it, but at least how do you deal with it? How do you work with it? You understand what I'm saying? How do you keep that shadow clean? You understand? How do you get those objects that's blocking that light? How do you get those objects to be so dense and so transparent that light can start to actually penetrate and flow through those objects that are there to block the light, so that the light can start penetrating that shadow? The light can start doing away with some of that shadow. Right? And this is what they say about shadow work. It says, what is shadow work? Working shadow work is this: working with your unconscious mind, not your conscious mind, because it's in your conscious mind where the ego is trying to control. The ego is trying to control what's going on in your conscious mind. So you have to go into your unconscious mind. You understand what I'm saying? To deal with your shadow, to start doing some shadow work. You got to get out of your conscious mind. You got to get out of that mind that's active and operating during the day while you working and all of that. You got to get out of that, and you got to start working with your unconscious mind. Because through your unconscious mind and working with your unconscious mind, you can deal with that ego, and you can start putting that ego in its place and diminishing the power of that ego. Remember, that ego is that social personality. That ego is the ego that's there to protect you so that you can survive and thrive. That ego is there to keep you in a place where you feel safe and secure and comfortable and familiar, even though that's not the best place for you to be in. Working with your unconscious mind to uncover the parts of yourself that you repress. How do you repress them? You stuff them over there in that shadow. You hide them and stuff them over there in that shadow so that you don't have to deal with them. This is the reason why there's this multiple personality phenomenon in mental illness, where people have these multiple personalities. They have suppressed and repressed so much trauma that they have developed these different personalities that come out to deal with different situations. It's a defense mechanism. But you have to go within your unconscious mind to uncover the parts of yourself that you have repressed and that you hide from yourself. Because before you hide them from anybody else, you hide them from yourself. If you didn't feel like it was necessary to hide them from yourself, you wouldn't worry about hiding them from nobody else. This can include trauma or parts of your personality that you subconsciously consider undesirable. You may not excuse me, even in your conscious mind, you may not realize that you have decided that this particular thing about yourself is undesirable or is unworthy or whatever. You don't even realize sometimes that but because in your subconscious mind you have done that. You have decided that this part of you is undesirable, is unacceptable, or whatever. You working all that you can to try to hide it and push it in the shadow. Working with your unconscious mind to uncover the parts of yourself that you repress and hide from yourself. This can include trauma, especially severe trauma, or parts of your personality that you subconsciously consider undesirable. Anyone can do shadow work on their own. However, consider seeking out a licensed therapist for treatment, especially if you struggle with severe trauma. Because it's that severe trauma that has been repressed over years and years and years and years and years that take people into mental illness, that take people into different areas of mental illness. And like I said, in some cases, they come out with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different personalities to deal with different areas in life as a defense mechanism. Why? Because they themselves cannot delve deep enough to go in there and actually face that trauma. So that the trauma was so severe that it actually splintered their personality. And there are different personalities that come out to deal with different situations that rise up in this person's life. That's the reason why it is imperative that you do shadow work. That's the reason why it is imperative that you deal with that shadow and you go within and you deal with that stuff that you've been trying to hide from yourself and hide from everybody else before it becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it does take you into some forms of mental illness. Okay, then it says here, what is the goal of shadow work? Shadow work is, at heart, about developing self-awareness and ultimately self-acceptance and compassion. So see, shadow work is all about you. Shadow work is all about getting you to a place where you are aware of what's going on within you. You are aware of those things that trigger you. You are aware of those things about yourself that you're trying to hide and that you're trying to keep secret. And ultimately, it's meant to lead to self-acceptance and you loving yourself. And you having some compassion for yourself. And you giving yourself a break. And you cutting yourself some slack. Shadow work is often both therapy and more spiritual, helping you see the different parts of yourself. For people who have been especially good at avoiding their shadow, for instance, because it is too far different from your own self-perception or desired impression. See, there's this image that you're trying to impress upon people about yourself. Or you trying to perceive yourself as being something other than what you really are. For people like that, shadow work is about acknowledging the existence of shadows and getting curious about exploring them. First of that, that's the reason why acceptance is such a high vibrational emotion. Remember that if I can remember, I'll put it in this video. But remember that chart where we talked about low vibrational emotions and high vibrational emotions. And remember, acceptance is a high vibrational emotion. And denial is a low vibrational emotion. And the reason why acceptance is such a high vibrational emotion is because just accepting a thing is what it is. And saying, okay, I see it for what it is. Okay, but what does it really mean? What is it really all about? See, acceptance opens the road, and it opens the way for exploration. It opens the way for self-awareness. It opens the way for you to get to know yourself. It opens the way for asking questions and getting answers. That's what acceptance does. Acceptance opens up the way to more awareness, right? Denial shuts all of that down. When you just flat out deny something, even though you're looking at it, you see it, and you just flat out deny it, then it shuts down any more exploration. It shuts down any more growth, any more expansion. It automatically shuts it down. That's the reason why denial is a low vibrational emotion. Because it shuts down even the possibility of you learning anything, even the possibility of you becoming more aware. That's what being conscious is. Being aware. And when you live in a state of denial, it shuts down any possibility of you becoming even more aware, even more conscious of what's going on around you, even more conscious of what's going on within you. So see, that's the reason why it says here, shadow work is, at heart, about developing self-awareness and ultimately self-acceptance and compassion. Shadow work is often both therapy and more spiritual, helping you see the different parts of yourself. For people who have been especially good at avoiding their shadow, for instance, because it is too far different from your own self-perception or desired impression, shadow work is about acknowledging the existence of shadows. Accepting the fact that, yes, I have shadows. Yes, there are things about me that I'm trying to hide. There are things about me that I don't really want to look at. There are things about me that I don't want to really deal with. You just accept that. Just accept it and acknowledge it. And because you accept it and you acknowledge it, now you're asking the question, but why? What are these things? Why do these things even exist? And what can I do to work with these things? What can I do to understand these things even better? So just acknowledging and accepting the existence of shadows gets you in that place where you might be curious about exploring them and figuring out what's really going on. Okay, how do I change this? How do I work this out? How do I make this better for me? Because I don't want there to be parts of me that I can't look at. Parts of me that I can't acknowledge. Parts of me that I'm running around trying to hide from myself. Less more trying to hide them from, I'm not even being real with me. How can I be real with other people if I can't even be real with me? If I can't even be honest with myself about certain parts of myself that I might not particularly like. Okay, well, since I don't like this part of myself, since I don't like feeling these type of feelings, or I don't like remembering these certain events, or I don't like the way remembering this makes me feel about me, then I need to go in and I need to deal with this. I need to go in and I need to figure out how to get rid of this. I need to go in and figure out what it is that triggers these feelings, these emotions, you understand what I'm saying, in me, and how I can work around those triggers and get rid of those triggers. But if you just flat out living in denial, well, you cut off all of that. So you cut off learning more about yourself. You cut off understanding more about yourself. You cut off understanding more about the things that trigger you into thinking and feeling and operating and moving the way that you do. Why? Because denial just shuts all that down. Okay, let's move on. Now they ask the questions, how do I start doing shadow work? Okay. So you now understand how shadows in general are created. And that there has to be a light source. You understand what I'm saying? There has to be a light source. And there also has to be some object that's so solid that the light can't penetrate it. And that's how that shadow is created. Is when that light meets that solid object and it can't flow through that object. That's how that shadow is created, right? That's in general. Well, as far as you as an individual, as far as your shadow self, then it's the same thing. You have light within you. You were created from light. Light is in you, all around you. Light is in every cell in your body. But because you have experienced things, you may have experienced trauma, you may have experienced situations and events, you understand what I'm saying, that have created this blockage that is so solidified in your mind, in your consciousness, that it blocks the light. And the light is not flowing within you the way it's supposed to be flowing. And it has created this shadow. And you are using this shadow to hide these things about yourself, these events, these traumas, these feelings, these emotions, whatever, anything that you deem unworthy, unacceptable, unlikable, or anything that you might be feeling guilty about or ashamed of. You've tossed all of those things over in that shadow to hide them from yourself and everybody else. But if you can get to that place of acceptance, where you just simply accept and acknowledge that there are shadows, that there are things about you that you don't really want to deal with, that there are things about you that you really don't want to look at, that there are things about you that are just entirely too painful for you to go in and look at them and deal with them and all of that. So they have created a shadow. And it's in that shadow where you're hiding these things about yourself. Hiding them from yourself and hiding them from somebody, from everybody else. If you can just acknowledge that, if you can just accept that, then that's the first step to doing some shadow work. Because acknowledging it and accepting it will make you say, okay, but I don't want those things. I don't want these shadows. I don't want to keep hiding these things from myself. I don't want to keep running from these things. You know how they talk about, they got these old saying about we have to go and face our own demons? Well, that's what those shadows are. That's what those things in the shadows are. Your demons. And for some of us, they might be little teeny weensy demons. And for others of us, they might be great big huge demons. But they're yours. And they are only aspects of you that you keep hiding. Aspects of you that you don't want to deal with. Aspects of you that you don't want to look at. They're not some ugly things with horns and 10, 12 eyes and big old teeth and all of that are on the outside trying to get in to hurt you. No, your demons are within you. And they are aspects of you, aspects of your personality, or traumas that you have encountered, or events that you have been through, or situations in life that you have been through, and they have caused you to feel a certain type of way, and you don't want to deal with it. You don't want to look at it. So you put it in the shadow. And the longer it stays in the shadow, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and uglier and uglier and uglier in that shadow. So when you first put it in there, it might have been some little bitty teeny thing. But because you done kept it in there so long and then refused to look at it and deal with it for so long, it's just getting bigger, 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 and it's affecting your everyday life. It's affecting your relationships. It's affecting how you feel about yourself. It's affecting what you think of yourself. And because of that, it's affecting everything that you do. It's affecting you in every area of your life. You thought that you could throw it over there in that shadow, and as long as it stayed in that shadow and you ignored it, or you dismissed it, or you tried to run from it, or you tried to act like it didn't exist, that it eventually would go away. No, it's not going away. It's getting bigger and bigger, and it's having more and more and more effect on everything else that you're trying to do. On the things that you're trying to create for yourself. On the things that you're trying to manifest for yourself. And you keep wondering why, as hard as you're trying to work, nothing is working out. Nothing is turning out right. You understand what I'm saying? You can't catch a break. You're trying to wonder why, and you're looking all on the outside to see what external forces are working against you when it's not on the outside. It's coming from the inside. It's coming from that stuff in that shadow. Because you haven't dealt with it. You haven't really healed from it. And it's still affecting how you feel about yourself, and it's still affecting what you think of yourself, and it's still affecting how you move, how you operate, how you function. But you got to acknowledge that shadow and acknowledge, wait a minute, you know, it is still affecting me, so I need to go deal with it. You got to step outside of fear, take a couple of steps of courage, and look inward and go open that door to that shadow and say, okay, come on, we got to work this out. We got to figure this out, because I can't keep doing this. And I can't keep allowing something that happened in my past, or something that happened to me when I had no control over what was happening to me, or whatever the case, or something that I did that you know, I did when I didn't know any better, or when I thought I should be doing this and I was really doing that, or what. I can't keep on allowing that to keep hindering the process that I'm trying to make. But the first step is to acknowledge and accept that these shadows exist. And then start wondering, how do I get rid of it? Accept that it still has the power to affect your life. And the reason why it still has the power to affect your life is because you're hiding it. And because you're hiding it and won't acknowledge it, you're giving it power. If you go ahead on and acknowledge it and go ahead on and accept it, you take away the power. And you take back your power. Like I said, before you take back your power from any other source outside of you, you got to take back your power within you. From these things that are within you that are sucking up your power and keeping you from operating in your full power. So the question again, how do I start doing shadow work? Now that I know it's there, now that I have acknowledged it, I have accepted there are shadows, and I've accepted that these shadows are still affecting my life. They're still affecting my present moment. They're still affecting what I'm trying to create for my future, or for my family's future, or whatever. How do I get rid of these? How do I deal with these shadows? How do I deal with this stuff that I'm trying to hide from myself? This stuff about me that I don't really want to look at, and that I don't want to really deal with. How do I start that process? And the answer that they have here is, if you want to hang out with your shadow for a while, journaling, you know, writing down some stuff. You understand what I'm saying? Sit down and write down some things. Write down what triggers you. Write down what makes you feel like you're inferior to other people. Or what makes you feel jealousy or envy? What makes you feel bitterness or resentment? You understand what I'm saying? What makes you feel pain? What makes you feel like you're unworthy? Or what makes you feel like you're less than somebody else? Sit down and start thinking about the different experiences and interactions that you have on a daily basis that bring about these feelings. You know, what experiences, what interactions are you having that start you to thinking negatively about yourself, or negatively about certain people, or negatively about certain situations that you find yourself in? And start writing those things down. It's like it says, if you want to hang out with your shadow for a while, journaling can be a good way to start. The most straightforward way to do shadow work is to identify experiences or interactions where you felt inferior to others, tension in your body, or feelings of jealousy, envy, or anger. But in order for you to do that, you got to become aware. You've got to stop for a moment and take the time to become aware of these things that are triggering you. These things that are triggering certain feelings, certain emotions in you, that are triggering certain physical reactions in your body that don't feel good. Say, for instance, you having panic attacks, and you don't know exactly the reason why you're having panic attacks. Well, what you're going to have to start doing is, right in the midst of a panic attack, or just when a panic attack is about to start, instead of you panicking, you're going to have to slow yourself down, slow your mind down, take deep breaths, and think, what was I doing right before this panic attack hit? Who was I talking to? You understand what I'm saying? Who was I interacting with? What was I watching? What was I listening to? What were the thoughts that were going through my mind just before this panic attack hit? Because see, that panic attack in your body is a physical manifestation of something else that's going on energetically and spiritually with you. That's how you start the process of doing your shadow work. The very first step of it is acknowledgement, acceptance, and acknowledging that these shadows exist. Acknowledging and accepting that there are things about yourself that you just don't like. That there are things about yourself that you're trying to hide even from you. Things about you that you just do not want to deal with. You know, we've always known that in order to deal with a problem, first of all, you've got to acknowledge that there's a problem. First of all, you got to have some acceptance and some acknowledgement that there is a problem. Okay, well, now I acknowledge that, yeah, there is a problem. Yeah, something ain't right. There is an issue here. And once you acknowledge it and you accept it, then you can ask the question, okay, but then what do I do about it? And when you ask the question, what do I do about it? If you genuinely want to know, the universe will begin to bring things into your existence to help you answer that question. It says, who should not do shadow work? And I think everybody should do shadow work. But if you're dealing with severe trauma, severe repression, if you already have underlying mental conditions like anxiety or depression, or you have repressed for so long that, like I said, it has led to something as severe as a multiple personality disorder or whatever, you need a little help. Shadow work is something that you definitely should be doing, but you shouldn't be doing it on your own. You should be doing it with somebody that's trained. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go out and see a psychiatrist or whatever, but you need to find somebody that's trained in understanding what shadow work is, and they know the steps to lead you to doing it healthily, to lead you to doing it in a way that's beneficial to you, not in a way that's going to drive you over the edge. And let me put out a disclaimer here. I'm not offering any kind of mental anything. I'm not a therapist. I'm not offering any kind of mental advice, no kind of medical advice, none of that. I'm just breaking down what shadow work is and why it is so important. But anybody who is dealing with severe trauma, you understand what I'm saying? Trauma that lasted over years in their personal life. You know what I'm saying? Anybody who is already maybe dealing with some underlying mental health issues or mental health conditions or whatever. Yes, you still need to do shadow work, but you don't need to be doing it by yourself. You need to find somebody that's trained. Somebody that really knows the depths of how far you have to go to deal with those levels of trauma, those levels of repression. It says, if you who should not do shadow work? If you have any underlying mental health conditions like anxiety or depressions that's been recently triggered or difficult to manage, you may also want to prioritize treating those conditions before diving into shadow work, as they could cause additional complications during your therapeutic journey. So you definitely need to be working with somebody that's trained. You definitely need to be working with somebody that's trained. They might not necessarily have a license somewhere, but they are trained in helping with dealing with this area of the unconscious and the conscious mind. Now, hold on a minute, because I'm getting kind of, I didn't know I had been talking that long, but anyway, because I didn't mean for this to be this long. But anyway, let's get to the end of this, right? I want to go back over here, and I want to get into, it says a little bit about purpose. What is shadow work supposed to do? A shadow usually develops in early childhood, where we're told that certain behaviors are unacceptable. Proponents of shadow work says it can help heal generational trauma. You know, we've been talking a whole lot about generational trauma, breaking generational curses, the whole 9 yards. A shadow usually develops in early childhood when we're told that certain behaviors are unacceptable. Proponents of shadow work can say it can help heal generational trauma, allow people to rethink the messages they see in children in their life, cope with emotions in more constructive ways, and feel more whole. Right? Those are some of the purposes. That's some of what shadow work is supposed to do. It's all about healing. Shadow work is all about healing. Shadow work is all about identifying areas where you need to heal. Identifying aspects of yourself that you need to bring into balance. Because you just overboard over here, thinking that you just the ugliest, most unworthy thing in the world, and it's not, and that's not the case at all. You need some balance. You understand what I'm saying? You need to heal. But it's also about bringing about generational healing. You understand what I'm saying? Healing for generational trauma. You know, it's all about us rethinking the way we talk to children, and us rethinking how we programming these children. That's some of what shadow work is supposed to do. Then it says getting started, how to start shadow work. Okay, we just got into that when she was talking about journaling. You understand what I'm saying? And she was talking about identifying the experiences and interactions where you felt inferior to others, or you felt a certain type of attention or experience in your actual physical body, or you felt feelings of jealousy, envy, anger, bitterness, resentment, hatred. You understand what I'm saying? Think about what triggered those emotions. What triggered those negative thoughts? And how and what is it about you? How is those negative thoughts, those negative emotions, how is that a reflection of the you that you're trying to hide from yourself? And then it asks the question, where to start? Where to start with shadow work? Think about someone who triggers you. Think about somebody or certain circumstances or certain situations or certain experiences or certain interactions that trigger you, that trigger these negative thoughts, that trigger these negative emotions in you. Often these images are reflections of parts of ourselves that we find unlikable. So the reason why this person triggers you so much is because there might just be something about this person that reminds you of the you that you don't like. It may be something about this experience that reminds you of the you that you've been trying to hide from yourself and everybody else. And that's the reason why this person or this interaction or this experience triggers you so much. Maybe this experience reminds you too much of a past experience that caused you trauma. And because you won't go back and deal with that past experience, every time you find yourself experiencing this, it takes you back to that place. And it brings about feelings of guilt or feelings of shame or whatever. Often these images are a reflection of parts of ourselves that we find unlikable. So a good place to start with shadow work would be to think of someone who bothers you and reflect on what it is about that person that might also be within you. See, maybe the reason why that person triggers you so much, like I said, is because that person reminds you of the you that you don't like. The you that you're trying to hide from yourself and everybody else. Maybe that experience reminds you too much of a past experience where you experienced trauma or pain or hurt or betrayal or whatever. And that's the reason why that particular experience triggers you every time. Because you need to go back and you need to deal with that past experience. Because until you deal with that past experience, every time you find yourself in this situation, it's going to keep on triggering all of that negative. Because you haven't healed. And you won't even go deal with it enough to start the healing process. It says examples of shadow work. Another example of shadow work is engaging in psychodrama. In psychodrama, one can take on the roles of different parts of oneself in order to more fully explore what it feels like to embody each and every aspect of yourself. So you find yourself in a drama, in a fiction book, where you are every character in the book. And every character in that book represents a different aspect of you. And as you explore these different characters, you understand what I'm saying? As you engage in this drama, you start learning more and more and more about each aspect of yourself. Now that's just one example. You understand what I'm saying? That's just one example. But the most important thing that you have to do is you have to first acknowledge that there are shadows. You have to acknowledge that there are things about yourself that you've been trying to hide from yourself. That there are things about yourself that you don't want to deal with yourself. That there are things about you that you don't want to know about and that you don't want anybody else to know about. You have to acknowledge, accept the shadows. And then ask the questions. Why does it exist, and what do I do to make it better? What do I do to make it better for me? You're not worrying about how anybody else feels, what anybody else thinks. This is all about you. This is all about your journey. This is all about your process and your journey to healing. Doesn't have anything to do with anybody else. Who gives a flying flip how they feel or what they think about you? It's what you think about you. It's how you feel about yourself. It's about you getting to that place where you love you and you accept you just the way you are. And you know how to give yourself a break. You know how to forgive yourself for making mistakes. You know how to forgive yourself for stumbling every once in a while. Because we're going to all stumble. In some cases, we might actually fall. But as long as we get back up, that's okay. But it's all about you. That's what shadow work is all about. Shadow work is all about you being the very best you that you can be. And you can't do that when you're hiding certain parts of yourself from yourself. You can't be the very best that you can be when you can't be real with yourself. When you can't be honest with yourself. So this took a little bit longer than I meant for it to take. But I think it was necessary. I think it was necessary for somebody to finally just break down in simple terms what shadow work is. You understand what I'm saying? What the shadow self is. And why it is so very important that we do this shadow work. You understand what I'm saying? And shadow work is not something that you do once and for all. You understand? You constantly have to go within and check yourself. They call it scanning yourself. Where you actually just mentally go in and you really take the time to pay attention to what you're thinking, what you're feeling. You understand what I'm saying? Are certain things just triggering you just out of the ordinary? You know, are certain things just bothering you more than they should be bothering you or whatever? We all need to do these random checks every once in a while of ourselves. Right? Remember, it used to be an old saying in rap, in hip-hop, check yourself before you wreck yourself. So we all need to go in and do this shadow work. Shadow work is not something that we just do one time and then it's done. No, that shadow gonna still be there. And that shadow is gonna be there waiting for you to throw some stuff over in there that you're trying to hide from yourself. So every once in a while, you need to go have a check-in and have a sit-down with your shadow and make sure it ain't no stuff in there. Make sure that you heal it. Because just like we talked about when we first started this, when we first changed the direction of the channel and we got into healing and we got into more about solutions, the first thing that we talked about is healing and what healing is. And remember, we found out that healing is not some one and done thing. Not spiritual healing, not soul healing. Healing is something that goes on continuously. So that's the reason why you got to be checking your shadow and making sure that the healing process is continuing. And that you are constantly moving forward on your healing journey. And that you ain't throwing nothing over there in the shadow subconsciously that you don't even realize you put over there. So let me go over here in the shadow and check and make sure I ain't throwing nothing over there. You understand what I'm saying? Because the longer you leave it over there, it's not going to just disappear. And at first you may not realize that it's affecting your life. You may not realize that it's affecting the way that you think about yourself and the way that you feel about yourself and the moves that you are making. And it's actually affecting the words that are coming out your mouth. But the longer it stays over there, the more and more and more and more and more effect it has on your everyday life. So that's the reason why it's important for, and the main thing for all of us is to understand is that we all have these shadows. We all have a shadow self. And we all have things about ourselves that we might not be particularly proud of, that we may not be, particularly embracing. You know what I'm saying? Things about ourselves that we might be a little ashamed of, or that we might feel a little guilty about. We all have to do shadow work. From the smallest to the greatest, we all got to do shadow work. We all have to take a moment out and stop every once in a while and just go check ourselves so that we won't wreck ourselves. And realize, okay, wait a minute, I'm having a little bit too much trouble here. You understand what I'm saying? I'm having too much trouble being happy. I'm having too much trouble just enjoying life. You understand? I'm having too much trouble just living. You understand what I'm saying? This thing here just keeps triggering me. Or this thing here just keeps making me feel a certain type of way. Okay, well then when you acknowledge that, when you are become aware of that, then that's when you need to go to the shadow. And say, hold up, wait a minute, shadow, what you hiding over there? What have I thrown over there that I may not even be aware of? Let me go on over there and deal with it. And in most cases, we know what it is. In most cases, we know what it is that we're trying to hide from ourselves. We know what it is about ourselves or about our experiences that we don't want to deal with. So we put them in the shadow. You understand what I'm saying? That shadow is also what people call the skeletons in your closet. Every once in a while, you got to go in your own closet and you got to face them skeletons and you got to clean them skeletons out of your closet. So this is just where the spirit realm led me today to talk about shadow work and to try to break it down and simplify it so it won't be so overwhelming for people. So people won't think that it's just this big job. You understand what I'm saying? And it's just so hard to accomplish it. Oh my God, they're talking about doing shadow work. What is shadow? Nothing but you dealing with you. Nothing but you going in and facing those things about yourself that you don't like. Those things about yourself that you don't like, and because you don't like them, you don't want nobody else to know nothing about them. That's all it is. And like I said, the main thing for you to understand is, just like with everything else in the spiritual realm, you are not alone. You are not alone. We all have shadows. We all need to do shadow work. Shadow work is something that we all need to do. It's something that we all, no matter how high we vibrating, no matter what level we might think we on spiritually, or whatever the case may be, we all have to do shadow work. And it's something that it's an ongoing thing. It's not something, like I said, that you do once and you done. Why? Because you are experiencing new things every day. You are interacting with new people and interacting with new energies every day. So you never know when there was an experience, you understand what I'm saying, or an action, and you reacted a way that you didn't like. You understand what I'm saying? And you didn't deal with it, so you threw it over there in the shadow. Go back and deal with it. Go back and ask yourself, why did I react that way? You understand what I'm saying? Why did I let that thing trigger me so much? Why did I let that thing pull me out of my character? Why did I allow that thing to bring me out of high vibration down into this low vibrational place, and I stayed down here too long? See, those are the simple questions that you ask yourself. Because shadow work ain't about you and nobody else. Shadow work is about you and you. Now, like I said, if you got other issues going on, or you dealing with some severe trauma and some severe repression, you understand what I'm saying, and you got some other mental health issues going on and all that, I would suggest, I'm not advising anything, but I would suggest that you get some trained help with your shadow work. But the shadow work still got to be done. And if you get some trained help, somebody that's trained in doing that, then what goes on between you and them is between you and them. They not there to judge you. Why? Because they know they got to do their own shadow work. You can't judge. How can you judge anybody when we all got to do it? When it's something that we all dealing with. Ain't no judgment here. Just because your shadows don't look like my shadows, that don't mean that I can judge you or you can judge me. It just means that we all in this together. So that's it. I ain't trying to be here no longer. But like I said, this is just what I wanted to bring you as far as shadow work is concerned. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do, so I'm not going to put any links to anybody that you can talk to or anything like that. If you want to do more research and want to do more work on shadow work, on the shadow self, then I would urge you to do that. I ain't telling nobody to take my word for nothing. That's the reason why I'm not putting no links, or nothing in there, because you have to decide what's best for you. You have to decide the best way to deal with your shadow. Why? Because it's another aspect of you. But I just wanted to simplify it for the collective, for the community. I just wanted to simplify what your shadow self is, and what shadow work is, and the purpose of it, and how important it is to you becoming a whole person, and you recognizing who you are, and letting that light that's within you shine as bright as it can possibly shine. All right? So again, y'all continue to love yourselves, continue to know yourselves, continue to take these steps forward in your healing journey, in your spiritual journey. Continue to look out for yourself, take care of yourself, continue to love each other and care for each other. And I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.